Hello, I'm Adrian Ashton. I'm an enterprise consultant and I'm based in the north of England in the glorious Pennines. So I'm actually an unpaid carer now for 3 immediate family members, and that started 7 years ago. It struck me that I had to rethink my business model. I've still got to market, I've still got to promote myself. So I plan my marketing on a worst week scenario. If everything kicks off, what's the minimum I know I could do? That's what I aim for. Everyone at some point in their lives will need care or will need to be a giver of care to someone else.
Welcome to another one. Now, you would have thought after 360 episodes, we would have basically heard everything, right? But I don't think we've spoken about the experience of being a carer for somebody whilst also trying to run your freelance business. Being an unpaid carer, also trying to keep your clients happy as well. But that's Adrian's experience, and he really opens up about it. Thank you, Adrian. Talks about the challenges and the changes that he is trying to bring, the support that he's trying to bring. You can find links to these topics in the show notes to this episode. But even if that's not something you're going through right now, I'm always conscious that who knows what curveballs life will throw in our direction. So I really think it's worth paying attention to. I hope you enjoy it. Also, want to let you know that these episodes are now available in video in extra places, not just YouTube, but also Spotify and now Apple Podcasts. It's been quite a lot of effort to get them up on Apple, but hopefully it's been worth it. So I know it still sounds the same if you're listening, but if you're watching as well, thank you very much. So that's on YouTube and Spotify, where you can also leave comments, and then Apple Podcasts as well. Okay, let's crack on. We're heading to the north of England, to the Pennines. It's like the backbone mountains of... Can you call them mountains? Maybe hills. Maybe mountains is pushing it. Of Britain. To chat to this week's guest, that is freelance enterprise consultant Adrian Ashton. Hey, Adrian.
Hello.
How about we get started hearing how you got started being freelance?
It starts with me being professionally shafted by one of the country's leading national social businesses of the time. So I was living down south. I was born in Cambridge, educated there, was working there. And then just over 20 years ago, got approached by this company I've decided to never name publicly, saying, we've heard about you. And remember, this is an age before iPhones, social media, fax machines were the height of instant communication. So the fact that they'd heard from me all the way up there showed there was something I was doing really interesting. And they said, we want you on our team. We're going to create a post. And we know you've just started a family, just had our first kid. So we've got this package, really attractive package, great career prospects. So I did it, recruited my successors, moved up north to somewhere that I didn't know anyone, had no reputation, no network, no contacts. And in the process of moving up, they said, we're very sorry, we can't create the job after all. Bye-bye, good luck. Now, I had the half-second conversation in my head, which is, I know I can take them in the tribunal for this. Absolutely. But do I want to start this next chapter of my life with blood on the carpet? So I decided, no, I'm not going to do that. I'll do what I've done ever since I was a kid, which is I go and knock on doors. You know, hello, here's a job. And the first place that said, we'll give you a job was an enterprise agency. So they said, we're looking for business advisors. You seem to know your stuff, but you've got to be self-employed. We bring you in as a freelancer to deliver on the contracts. So that's what kind of tipped me into it. And then I kept saying yes. And I obviously did a good job. My name got passed around. People invited me to other things. And I've always tried to say yes in life rather than no.
And what year are we talking about that you first went freelance then?
The 5th of January, 2005.
Wow.
21 years.
Your term of sort of being an enterprise consultant, that has basically stayed the same.
Yes. But I kind of define enterprise not as let's make a business to make lots of money, as the Pet Shop Boys so eloquently sang in the song Opportunities, but the question, what if and why not? Why can't we change the way that this board of a charity works? What if this government policy focused on something else? And those sorts of questions about change and influence.
So those first clients sounded very much word of mouth?
Yes, and that's continued ever since. So recently I've become a case study focus for someone doing a doctoral thesis.
Wow.
Which has been really interesting because I've had to actually look back over my history as a freelancer to look at all the data and what's worked and what hasn't worked. What hasn't worked is a website. Even though it's been SEO'd and it's gone through all the stuff, what hasn't worked is social media, despite lots of different campaigns and experiments and things. What has worked is repeat clients and direct word of mouth introduction. And I have an idea that that's possibly linked to the fact that a lot of the work I do is quite messy and also sensitive.
So word of mouth, what would you say? I mean, do you do anything to encourage that word of mouth?
I try and be helpful. I try and encourage follow-ups. So I recently reached out to a client I did some work with 6 months ago, a sort of large charity who'd asked me to come in to do a salary review for them. And then, of course, job's done. Okay, thank you very much. Sign off they go. Then, of course, I follow up a few months later saying, what happened next? And encouraging that they got back recently and said, because of that work you did, we've now looked at it as the trustees. We've been able to spend some time going through it. And what it's meant is we've changed our salary points. So people are now actually getting paid more and they feel more likely to want to stay with the charity. And it's made it easier for us to recruit the talent and skills we were needing to before. Now that's kind of reinforced that message to a client that says, as freelancers, we do work with clients all the time, but then they move on to something else. I think we have to go back and prompt them every so often to say, remember that adventure we had together? Wasn't it nice? And then also I cheat as well a bit. So I send Christmas cards every year, actual physical cards through the post. And it's quite sad. So something I've noticed in recent years, Steve, about the cards is the increasing propensity of people to send me a thank you message saying it was the only physical Christmas card they received in their office that year. It's quite sad. We're kind of losing that human connection.
So if word of mouth is so important, you obviously need lots of mouths talking about you. How do you go out and meet more people?
Well, here's the trick. I don't want lots of mouths talking about me. A few years ago, I made the choice to deliberately restrain and restrict the amount of work I do as a freelancer. I am not looking to grow my client base. Well, there's always a churn of clients, but I'm purposefully limiting the amount of money I want to earn, the amount of work. And that's because I'm limited in the amount of work I can physically and emotionally deliver. So there's a managing expectation thing. I don't want to generate lots of inquiries that then says, I've set people up, I've upset people, it's broken a thing. Earlier this year, in sort of January time, I started to get approached by different people saying, word of mouth's working and can you work with us on this project? But it's short deadline because we're coming up to the end of the financial year. We've got to deliver this by then and now. And I had to turn and say, no, there is no capacity in my calendar to do that work by that time with you to any level of quality or standard that you'd need it. And that was really hard for me. I mean, one of them was a national museum, wanted to work on a community campaign. I love museums. We should all spend more time in museums because they're really cool places. And the fact and it's a museum that I know of and I think is one of the really good ones. And I had to say no to them because they'd come at the wrong time of year. So again, so there's a balancing act, I think, in terms of how I get word out. The second part then is how do I get the mouths blabbing about me as we go along. I very rarely go to networking events now, not because I'm an introvert or I don't like them. Love performing in front of other people. I used to have a reputation as the guy with the shiny red helmet at networking events because I'd go there on a bicycle. Listen, any networking you do, the follow-up is crucial. You've got to do something at that event that gets you remembered when you do the follow-up. So I used to go on a push bike, cycle there. And then, I would say to people afterwards, I was the guy who came by his bicycle with, safety first, shiny red bicycle helmet. But my ability to get out of the house now to those physical events has curtailed a lot in recent years because I've become an unpaid carer. So it's a lot of kind of direct relationship, follow-up, being very targeted and precise about who I reach out to in those messages. But it seems to be working for now.
So when did you become an unpaid carer, or however you want to approach this element of the conversation? Because it's obviously a big part in, well, not just your life, but your business life as well, as the two come together.
Yeah. This is my 21st year of freelancing. In those first few years, I built my reputation up. I travel all over the country, even overseas. It was unusual if I'd gone 2 months without being on a plane to go somewhere. to work with a client or deliver some kind of workshop training course. And then about 7 years ago, one of my stepchild had an episode, and that started a process where they went through various assessments. They now hold various badges, and I became recognised as their unpaid carer as they go along. They're now an adult, but they still need the element of support. And then for my previous marriage, one of my children there came to live with us. They started to struggle. They have again gone through some assessment processes, now got some badges as a result. And then through that process, I've become registered as their unpaid carer. So this whole thing's like 7 years ago. And then a couple of years ago, my now wife had a significant health issue. She had some sort of major surgeries. And because of that, she's physically limited at the moment in terms of where she was, where her recovery's at. We'll hopefully find out over the next couple of years how much of her previous independence she can physically retain. Should all be pretty straightforward, but bodies are weird things in terms of how they work. So in my last carers assessment, when I went through with the kids, they said actually because of the support she needs from me, that they said actually I'm also ticks the box for her. So I'm actually an unpaid carer now for 3 immediate family members at the moment. And that started 7 years ago.
Okay, we're up and running with Adrian's story, back with it in a moment. I just want to let you know that this episode is supported by Ecamm. Ecamm is like a video studio for your Mac, and you can use it not just for live streaming and webinars and things like that, but even within Google Meet or Zoom calls, any of those video calls. I'll tell you more about it later on in this episode, but try it for yourself at beingfreelance.com/ecamm. Right, now let's get back to Adrian's story.
So 7 years ago, when I started this journey, it struck me that I had to rethink my business model. I wasn't going to be able to travel around the country or overseas as freely as I did before. I wasn't going to be able to go to the events that I could in person. My flexibility was changing as well in terms of, health appointments or emergency care that might need to happen. So I tried to figure out, how do I do this? How have other freelancers done it? So I started to go to forums and groups at that time. Couldn't really find anything. No one was talking about this. And so I thought, okay, this is interesting. So I thought, well, maybe there's not a lot of us after all. So I did some research. I looked into official statistics. And then at that time, it's about 7 years ago, what I found through official statistics sources is there's about 500,000. Let me reframe that. 7 years ago, there were 500,000 freelancers who were also unpaid carers. But no one was talking about it. And so I dug a bit deeper. And what I discovered then is that if you are self-employed, freelancing or small business owner, you are the only type of unpaid carer not recognized in the legislation or policy about unpaid carers, which means that none of the carer support services recognize you or understand the support you need or can offer you any support, which also means none of the business support services that government supports or funds or is out there recognize you or can offer you support. So kind of remix your business model. So I decided to out myself, to make it a first date disclosure with any prospective client, which is completely at odds to all the advice that I was given by the experts and the gurus in the mastermind chairs and things at the time. Because for me, I didn't want that secret in the back of my head that if I'm working with a client on a project at any moment, knowing that I may have to cut a call short or on the day or the day before say, we've got to cancel this online workshop. We've got to cancel this meeting. I can't finish that draft for you tomorrow as I thought because I've got to take someone to A&E because someone's fallen on the stairs, because whatever it is. I can't live with that, trying to hide that. I thought, let's just be open about it. So I was open with clients about it. So it's, I say, I can't work with you if you can't accept this. And then also started to out myself in different freelancer forums and groups as well. And that was really interesting. So subsequent to that time, there's been some national bodies. So we've had the likes of what was Freelance Heroes. Freelancing Business, as a kind of a European model as well, asked me to do some roundtables with them. IPSI, Independent Professionals and Self-Employed, another kind of professional body for freelance sole traders, picked up on my research, asked me to do some work with them. They've now created their own policy position on this. I was invited to a roundtable with the Department of Business and Trade recently as well about this. Enterprise Nation, that we've both been invited to do turns on in the past as well, and invited me to do one of their sessions about this. And that's been really encouraging because sharing that story openly has helped me normalize it more, make more sense of it. The way we tell stories helps us understand our position more. But then through that, so many people, and even within our own family of biscuit munchers here in the Being Freelance, there are quite a few of us who are unpaid carers as well. Now, I choose deliberately never to kind of go, oh, they're a carer, they're a carer, they're a carer. It's their choice to disclose or not. I also never choose to disclose any of the details of the family members that I'm the carer for, because it's their story to tell, not mine. But through those processes, loads of people have come forward to me, either in public comment or by direct message, going, we are so encouraged to realize it's not just us. We didn't know how to wave a flag. We were concerned this would damage our reputation with clients. We thought we'd lose work. How do we kind of to make this go? So there's been this real kind of appreciation in some places from some people, which has been great. It's purely selfish on my part. I'm just trying to help figure out, find other people who figured it out to go along the way. Now, just to go back, that figure, 500,000 people 7 years ago. Now, recently, Carers UK put out some research last year about our counterparts in salaried employment. And what they identified last year was that every day, 600 people who have regular jobs have to quit those jobs because they become unpaid carers. Okay, 600 people across the whole economy in regular jobs. Now, that's a huge knock to the economy, productivity, all the rest. However, carers allowance is a weird system because less than 10% of unpaid carers are actually eligible for carers allowance to apply for it. So that means of those 600 people who were working, they've now had to stop. Most of them will not be able to get any financial support as a carer role, but they still need to earn money. So they're going to become freelance like us. So we've got about 500 people a day becoming freelance because they're an unpaid carer, because they can't find any other way of working, which means that in the next year or two, there's going to be 1 million of us out there. That's the context. Now, why this is important, if you're listening in, folks, and you've got the badge like me as an unpaid carer, then you know that according to the research and the statistics, we are twice as likely to be in poverty than any other type of unpaid carer. Okay, which is what the data tells us. And that's largely because our ability to do freelance to work is at least 20% squashed. Again, other national research to deliver client work, because we haven't got the support to kind of balance this out. So there's a moral case on it there. There's also an economic case. There's a policy case. This is why if you're not an unpaid carer and a freelancer, you go, that sounds awful, but so what? And Dad, it's not me. We should all care about this because as freelancers, our productivity is squashed. Then the wider economy that as freelancers we rely on to get work from other clients is running short by about £20 billion a year at GDP. So all businesses are struggling and not doing as well and can't generate the inquiries and the work for all of us in return. So this kind of feeds around. And there's also a longer term issue on this as well, which is we know that being freelance, being self-employed, research shows it's pretty much the worst thing you can do for your future mental health and well-being. Actually, being an entrepreneur, being freelance, if you're not careful, actually damages your mental health and well-being, unless you're part of a great community like Being Freelance, obviously. Now, being an unpaid carer is obviously also the worst thing you can do for your future mental health and physical health, which means that this nearly 1 million people of us at the moment are ticking time bombs in the NHS. We are the most at-risk group of a future physical mental health crisis. And yet we're not in the systems anywhere. We're not recognized. So what I've been trying to do is, by outing myself, waving this flag, trying to kind of show some solidarity with fellow biscuit munchers who are trying to figure this out as well, share each other's stories carefully, respectfully, so we can all make more sense of it. And then also try and get a bit more recognition for us to say, how, the more and more of us are in this circumstance all the time. Because at some point in our lives, everyone at some point in our lives will need care or will need to be a giver of care to someone else. Probably both. Care is one of these massive taboo stories we have in the country. And for most of us, most unpaid carers, freelancing is the only way we can do it in terms of being able to keep the rent paid because there is no support. Like I say, carers allowance, less than 10% of unpaid carers are eligible for it. And that's not because the government's been a duck about it. It's because carers allowance was designed on certain assumptions about how unpaid care worked. And in the day, that was broadly correct. Times moved on. Unpaid carers now come in much more varieties and colours. Unpaid care is not just about, being with your parent in their final chapter. Being an unpaid carer is not just about having a young child living with pronounced physical disabilities. It can be someone who foster cares children. It can be, in my case, a spouse. It can be children who've now become adults, but who need that ongoing support as well. This is huge range of circumstances that unpaid carers crop up in. Anyway, I'm kind of this becoming a bit of there should be kind of an orchestra playing in the background to all this as we go along.
From all of that amazing sort of bringing together of other voices and letting your voice be heard, is anything happening?
Other things happening. Things are happening if you know where to look for them, I think is the answer. Things are always happening, whatever circumstance you're in, unpaid caring, divorcee, freelancers who are divorced. I've been divorced, remarried now, but then what it meant was I've had to financially reset everything at the age of 50. So as a freelancer, how do you rebuild that identity? Anyway, sidetrack. The communities that are there, so IPSI, independent professionals and self-employed, took my initial research that I'd done about unpaid carers, how many there were, the issues. They laid onto that research with their own, and they've produced a policy position. So you can look on their website, the stuff there. There's Carers UK. They are looking to expand and update their guidance, their resources for unpaid carers who are also freelancers, because they recognize now there is this growing army of us out there. And there really should be something better for us to do that with. So I've kind of offered them, said, look, here's all the resources I've amassed over the years from the roundtables, from the other webinars to help feed into that. So we're seeing something come out there. Department for Business and Trade did a roundtable last year. So it's about the Carers Leave Act, which, of course, freelancers, we don't get any of that kind of legislation or legal protections in anything. But the fact that I got noticed for my efforts, and they were able to I was able to get this onto their radar to say this is not part of their consultation for that roundtable, but it is in the system now. Things slowly trickle through. And this is what I've seen with stuff changing, Steve. We have this idea that we need to do a big campaign, big petition, and that will change it. Stuff takes time. A few years ago, I changed company law. Well, I changed community interest company law by accident. We can change stuff. We all change stuff. We all think we can't. But actually, no, if me, without any formal qualification, can change company law with some well-crafted letters to the right people at the right time, any of us can change anything. And we, as freelancers, we do this to our work all the time. I think it goes back to the earlier point about how often do we go back to previous client projects 6 months on and say, what happened next? We all create massive impacts, way more than we realize, because we don't stop and pause and realize them, recognize them, capture them, and then share them on as a celebration, as an encouragement to others. That potential, it gets lost. We lose that momentum. That potential to create more change doesn't happen.
You mentioned being very forthcoming with clients,
Yeah.
Straight up, this is my situation. How else have you kind of dealt with this within yourself and your own business?
Pragmatically, I think, is the answer. So as an unpaid carer, the needs, the support that the people you care for is constantly changing. So for me, what that means is I've had to calendar block out certain times of the week, standing caring commitments that happen on a regular basis. At the moment, those are about to expand. So there are sort of certain blocks of the week where I cannot commit to any client work, calls, being at a keyboard, researching stuff, just can't do it because I need to be on hand for those activities. And like I say, recently that's now expanded. So there's another kind of block of the week that's happening in. So I've made this choice to go, okay, I can try and reflex my calendar, so be a bit more flexible about where people say, be clear with your boundaries. I say, well, I'm flexible with my boundaries. It's not unknown that I'll be catching up with stuff at weekends or in an evening. to balance out the hours and the work. We mentioned earlier about the fact that I don't want loads and loads of inquiries all the time, because that's an unmanageable expectation in the world. And I don't kind of want to set myself up, and I don't want to let people down. So I purposefully, in my head, have limited my growth aspiration as a freelancer. I have purposefully curtailed my ambitions, my expectations for how much I can earn. And that has a knock-on effect, which is that means there is less disposable income to do things with. But it's a trade-off, right? No one in this world says the world is a fair place or you're owed anything. No one says you are entitled to 2 holidays overseas every year. That's not in law anywhere. That's not a thing. The fact I have all my limbs, there's a coffee in the pot, the power is on, it's raining, but it's raining. That's going to water the plants. We find ways to make it work. I use Google Calendar a lot, click and drag that calendar blocking stuff all the time. Great way to kind of triage stuff day by day. Marketing, so I've still got to market, still got to promote myself, remind clients I'm there. That word of mouth will dry up otherwise. So I plan my marketing on a worst week scenario. If everything kicks off, what's the minimum I know I could do? That's what I aim for. And if I can do that, great. If I can do more, even better. And then there's other things that I take a serendipitous approach to. So some people may know that I've written some books. I'm doing some more in the future. So accepted wisdom says you set yourself a target, 500 words a day, chapter a week, hour a week, whatever it is, right? You kind of have this habit. We build these habits. I don't do anything of that. I wait until a client cancels a call on the moment. So like yesterday, I was due to kind of have a review call with a client, and came to the time, they didn't show up. They weren't on the call. I couldn't get them on the phone. Something's obviously happened. That's life, right? I get it. So I've got an hour in my calendar. And so in that hour, I go, right, this is now my hour to write. Get the manuscript up, get the notes out, go back and do it. So there's certain things that I kind of go, this is critical to remaining a freelancer, doing a tax return, sending out the invoices on time. There's certain things that are that kind of that enjoyment we get as a freelancer. There's stuff that we can only do because we're freelancing, that political freedom we have. I changed company law because I'm a freelancer. I couldn't have done it otherwise. It's too sensitive. No one's paying me to write books. You don't make money writing a book either. So that's why I'm hoping, Netflix, if you're watching, open to being option. Alexander Skarsgård, if your agent's listening, my wife's very keen to cast you in the role. Just, if you don't know who Alexander Skarsgård is, just Google him up, people, and then take a moment. That's fine. So there's the kind of, this, we talk about the flexibility we have as a freelancer. And I think there's something about absolutely flexibility in working habits, but then there's also about constraints. And one of the things I've always loved since I came across it decades ago is something called the theory of constraint. And theory of constraint says you can be so much more creative and have so much more enjoyment if you draw a line around yourself. I think we had this idea, being an unpaid carer, being freelancing. Oh, I can't get, this is why I don't get to the meetups, to play crazy golf with you all. Not because I'm embarrassed that I wouldn't do very well. I'd probably trash you all, as a kid. But because physically it's really hard for me to arrange to be away from the family home. That time I've got is either spent caring or earning money. It's just the nature of the world. It's a constraint. But because I recognize the constraint, I lean into it. What can I do within this? Where are the opportunities to have more fun? And because I recognize those opportunities as being fewer, I enjoy them more. I get much more out of those times I have just to sit and read a chapter of a book unexpectedly, to write another few pages of a manuscript. That's so much more enjoyable for me as a freelancer because it's that theory of constraint. Work with what you've got, and it's so much more liberating. And you realize, my gosh, this opens up new ways of thinking about who I am, what I can do.
Back with Adrian's story in a moment. This episode is supported by Ecamm, which I have been using for years to make everything I do video-wise when it's live from my Mac look as good as it can. It brings all of my branding to both webinars, live streams, even video calls. You can connect it to your own webcam. So you show up in Google Meet, Zoom, even Teams calls looking like you're broadcasting a TV studio. It's so cool. When we did a live stream to LinkedIn last year about tax for freelancers, remember that? Making tax digital sounded boring. as a topic, but it looked amazing because we were using Ecamm. Also, just this week in the community, we did one of our live shows, the Freelance Disco with freelancer Matt Shamauer. We did that with music videos and overlays, and he and I joined together on the screen like we were in a TV show because we used Ecamm. You can get the replay, by the way, in the Being Freelance community. So if you want to try it for yourself, go to beingfreelance.com/Ecamm, and there's a discount code on there as well, so you can save money if you do go for a paid plan, but you can try it for free. Anyway, thank you very much to Ecamm for supporting this episode. Right now, let's get back to Adrian's story.
Talk to other unpaid carers. What comes out is we all suddenly realize we have become, as people, our skill set, the way we see the world, the way that we can connect with other people, it's just massively amplified in ways that we never thought possible. There's a really great blog actually called Number 18 in the Corner. Number 18 in the Corner is written by someone who is also an unpaid carer, solo unpaid carer like me, for a family member, and trying to juggling freelance with it. Fantastic stuff they put out. And one of the things was about, if you were applying for a job and you listed the skills you got as an unpaid carer who's also freelancing, any employer would bite your arm off to go with that skill set. But employers, there's this kind of idea that if you're an unpaid carer, you're not employable, you're not trustworthy because you're not dependable. Which again is part of what I'm trying to do in terms of not only my working practices, Steve, but how I play this out to the world as well. Is I'm very open about what's it cost me to be an unpaid carer and what's it cost my clients. So as part of my impact report every year, and we mentioned you featured in the last one, this is not the first time we've tried to do this conversation. You tried to get me in before, but I said, because of the unpaid caring commitments, when you were able to do it, I wasn't. There's a lost opportunity. I turned down an invitation to meet with the chief executive of the RSA to talk about my book. One of my books that has kind of caught their interest. It's on their library. Because it just didn't fit with that. But then also kind of say to clients, this is what it's costing. Part of that disclosure that I do, that first date conversation, is I'm an unpaid carer. This means I may need to suddenly disappear mid-call or miss a deadline with you. However, before they can start to panic too much. However, this is what I put in place to protect it and mitigate it. And then over the last year, this is the number of times it's happened and what it's cost clients. Over the last year, the money that my clients have lost in terms of, lost productivity to them and all the rest is about £500 in terms of when I couldn't balance it and make something I couldn't mitigate it off. So again, I kind of give them that sense of, here's the issue, here's how it won't be a problem for us in a working relationship. And if you're still worried something might kick off, here's the likelihood. There's, names, nice things, numbers. And everyone, no client has ever then turned around and said, that's great, but we can't work with you. If anything, it's made it a much stronger trusting relationship. And actually some clients have come back to me and said, we're really grateful you've told us this and explained it to us in terms of how you manage your working. Because in our team, we know there are people who are unpaid carers, but we've never known how to open the conversation with them. We've never known what support they might need because we're all figuring it out as we go along day to day. But because you've done it, we've been able to support our team better. So it's not just about, as freelancers, I'm trying to encourage and show solidarity with each other. I've accidentally, unintentionally, helped some clients' own sort of teams and workforces have better relationships too, which is nice.
Tell me more about this impact report, because it sounds... Well, no, tell me what it is. But I'm imagining it must be important to you because the fact is you've done it for so long, and in the past 7 years, this could have easily been something you went, well, I've got enough on my plate.
Screw it, yeah.
I'm not going to spend time doing this. But you've kept it up. I've been doing it for over 20 years, and it's never won me any work. Okay, this is the key thing. I don't do it to win work. So in the 1990s, I came across this idea called social accounting, which is a concept that says broadly, financial accounts tell us how well we managed our money. Okay? Social accounting tells us how well we managed our relationships and what happened in the wider world and other communities because we tried to be good with more than just our money.
So what, in terms of running our business, what did our business do that helped not kill any baby seals? What did our business do to try and help reduce, increase recycling? Because those are good things for all of us, right? Just business and context. And then over the years, I got interested in that, did some work around it in my previous salaried roles. So my previous salaried roles, I sort of got involved in that community, that field of professionals. And then since becoming freelance as well, I've been invited by national sector bodies to create toolkits that says, if you're a community-owned football club, how do you understand the change, the benefit you're creating for your town or your city because your football club is owned by the community rather than some private shareholder? But that kind of got me interested in this idea of, I think it's a good thing to do for businesses. And I've always had an idea that why would I encourage anyone to do anything I'm not prepared to do myself? It's not credible otherwise, right? So I'll never suggest to any client and any fellow freelancer, why don't you try this? Unless I've done it on myself, like pricing. I occasionally with clients have a game of pay what you feel pricing with me. Bonkers idea, but actually works quite well sometimes. Anyway, impact report. So accountability is important. So how do I make sure I'm accountable? How do I keep myself honest and true? How do I kind of make sure I'm living the values that are important to me in terms of who I am, how I can sleep with myself and answer to my God at night? So this idea of an impact report says, I've created a framework that says, as I freelance in my business model, how has that helped me live out my values? How has that helped me not be a duck? How has that helped my clients to kind of do stuff? So my impact report is not about, this is the project I did and the nice thing you did for the client. We have case studies and testimonials for that. The impact report is about, because I've chosen to use local suppliers, what has that meant for my local community? Because I have chosen to work remotely as much as possible, what has that meant for the environment? Because I have chosen to maximize the tax I pay, controversial, I know. Most people don't want to pay tax. I think, personally, I quite like tax. I want to pay as much of it as I can. I've chosen my business model that maximizes the tax that I pay. If I think learning is important, how have I designed my workshops, my training courses to help learners get the most out of them? That, how am I working? How's a model that kind of echoes and amplifies that out? So that's kind of why I've done it. But then again, over time, like with Unpaid caring stuff, other stuff's happened. So I've kind of had feedback from the Institute of Social Value, who recently made me a fellow for kind of my work of doing this over the last decades. I've also been invited by various kind of roundtables, other programs to say, what you're doing as a freelancer, how you've evidenced it. I'm showing that as freelancers, we are having way more impact than people think we do. And in ecosystems, on national policy, on government agendas, because I can evidence that really easily. And I've built into my management accounts, my receipt system, all the rest. I track it all the time. And this kind of says that as freelancers, this is part of the argument we should be taken more seriously, because to echo the unpaid carers things, you look at all government policy for business support, nothing for freelancers in it ever. It's all about the big businesses, all about bringing in big investment. But yet I'm showing at the other end, as freelancers, we're actually probably doing more to support the wider ecosystems for communities, the economy and others than other businesses are. As freelancers, we're setting standards for the business community that we should get more recognition for. But if we're not shouting about it, if we don't evidence that, if we don't share the story, if we don't get our trumpets out, blow our own bugles on this, no one else is. But that's the only way we're going to create change. We tell the stories. Podcast here is great, part of that. Clip it out, share the links. We try and get it to the right people as well. Don't go to your councillor, don't go to your MP, because as soon as they change, everything's reset. Find the civil servants. They're there for life. Find the people in those, council departments. Get to know them. That's how we create that change that's going to benefit us all as a community, as freelancers, better in the future.
Just briefly, this impact report, what difference does it make to your business by monitoring these things, presumably all the time, and then collating it each year?
It gives me a reassurance. It gives me confidence and validation. One of the things that we struggle with as freelancers is, am I doing the right things? Is this good enough? Some people refer to it as imposter syndrome, self-doubt, because we're in our own echo chamber. We haven't got colleagues or line manager giving us that regular appreciation. So part of this impact report is my attempt to try and create an annual appraisal for myself to say, am I still doing this? It's also part of my business development. So because I do this every year, if we measure something and don't use it, what was the point, right? We've got to measure, we've got to do something. It's been an ego project otherwise. So every year as I've done this, at the end of it, I have a page in the report where I go, right, I've reflected on this. This is what I think it's told me. This is what I'm going to change in how I work. This is what I'm going to do differently this year. And then the next year, those regular numbers go on. And then I go back to those things of this is what I was going to change. This is what I'm looking at. And how that's helped me as a freelancer in my business model. I've tried changing this. I'm going to experiment with that. I've got a year then as an experiment to run with it. And I'm being open and accountable with the world. And some of that stuff's made me more resilient as a freelancer. We have a lot of knocks. I'm trying to claim the title for the most, but since I started freelancing, I've gone through a divorce, been made homeless twice, had legal actions brought against me, had trips in ambulances, had to have short notice surgeries. But clients don't care. They still need the job delivering, right? Kids don't care. They still want feeding at tea time. We have to kind of keep this going. So there's something about those things that I've gone through have helped me build that resilience, that reflection, give me that encouragement. 21 years freelancing. Very few of us make it this far. And actually, if I'm honest, I've confessed this before, but the first 20 years of being a freelancer, I was trying to get out. Didn't want to do it. Every job opportunity I saw, every lead I got, I applied for a job. Wanted to get back on a respectable payroll because holiday pay, sick pay, pension contribution. Remember, I had a hard financial reset at the age of 50. Would have been great. But then after 20 years of applying for jobs, the caring role expanding as well, I wouldn't employ me in terms of the caring responsibilities I have now and the flex that I need. So I've decided, 21st year of doing it, I'm going to take it seriously. And that impact report gives me a benchmark that says, how have I can go back over that kind of longitudinal data set and say, how have I changed the way that I work over time? What's worked? Because we get lost in the long grass as freelancers. It's very easy. We need to come up and say, that thing I did 2 years ago, or when I changed my business model to do that, is it still the right thing? I've made a decision this year, after 15 years of being all over social media, I'm going to be less noisy on social media. Because this impact report, part of the data analytics has shown me over 15 years, despite different campaigns, efforts, experiments, all the rest, it's never generated me work. It's helped a little bit with that direct word of mouth stuff. But again, like I said, I'm trying to manage that now very carefully in terms of not overdoing it. So this year I said, you know what? I'm not going to be as prolific. I'm going to try and take that time back. I'm still going to be there. I'll still pop up from time to time, but I'm going to use some of that time and energy to look at other things to try out, to see where it goes. So there's a business case for doing it in terms of helping me as a freelancer.
Okay, Adrian, there's so much that we could talk about.
Oh no, sorry. I keep going off on tangents. You should give me a timer. You've got 60 seconds to answer this without hesitation, repetition, or deviation. Go.
It's all good. Back with Adrian's story in a moment. As you can hear, community plays a huge part in his freelance career. If you don't have one around you, why not come and join us? Go to beingfreelance.com, click on community, as well as loads of live things like the co-working and meetups and socials and the quarterly checkups to see how our businesses are doing. You get to make one-on-one connections. You get to celebrate your wins rather than just do it by yourself. You even find work. People are often referring things or posting opportunities that they see. Come and find us. Go to beingfreelance.com, click on community. Right, let's get back to Adrian's story. I always do this thing where I ask for 3 facts about yourself to make 2 true, 1 a lie. Let me figure out the lie. What do you have for me?
Okay, so number 1, I once got a room full of academic researchers to slap each other in the face. Number 2, I was once smuggled into a conference dinner through a toilet window. Number 3, I was once detained by British Transport Police for carrying scimitars on a train. Now, okay. Scimitars, if you're not...
I was going to say, what's a scimitar?
Okay, it's a short curved sword.
So you're holding up a curved sword with a...
Yeah.
It looks plastic.
Yes, it is.
Right, I'm going straight to the toilet window. Why?
Because the conference dinner, it turned out, had a dress code that I was unaware of. So when I got to the door, I was not suitably attired. But I didn't have any recourse, and I'd arranged to meet people at the dinner, so I desperately needed to get in. And somebody I knew was there with me who was suitably attired and said, I know the venue, go down this alleyway and we'll kind of...
So you went into a fancy conference dinner by climbing through a toilet window, but then got to enjoy the evening?
Yeah, because I found a very darkened corner of the room where security couldn't see that I wasn't wearing the appropriate shirt and tie. Enjoyed the dinner, caught up with the contacts, and then hit the bar.
Why did you have swords or plastic swords on a train?
Because I was on my way to deliver a workshop as part of a business growth program to help business owners understand their accounts. And as part of that, I needed a range of props to illustrate some of the learning points.
Yeah. I know you love a prop. You share lots of pictures of yourself online with various props doing various things. So that sounds possible. And why wouldn't you go, if you were a British Transport Police person, go up to somebody seemingly carrying a weapon?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, why did you get them to slap each other? Very quickly.
Okay, I was giving an address at a conference and I was the first speaker one after lunch. So I decided I needed to try and get them all a bit more enlivened and awake. So I encouraged them to stand up, wiggle your fingers, wiggle your toes, and they all did. So I thought, okay, how far can I take this? So I kept slowly adding in, rub your face, pat the shoulder on the person next to you, and then just how far can I get? And because people kept doing it, like a Simon Says thing. And then I thought, okay, no one's going to go with this. So I said, slap the face of the person next to you. And they all did.
Okay, I'm going to say the Transport Police is the lie. I think you'd have had them in a proper bag. They wouldn't have been seen. I think that's the lie.
I'm afraid you are incorrect. Just to add to that story as well, I also had with me plastic toy pistols, handcuffs, safety goggles, all of which were critical props in teaching financial management and understanding. The toilet window is actually the thing. The toilet window is the lie.
Okay, well done. Now, if you could tell your younger self one thing about being freelance, what would that be?
Ask more outrageous things. I have been constantly amazed, Steve, over the last 21 years, just what people will agree to do, how far people will be generous with their time, will flex, will agree to stuff that you think is just no way they'll do it, if we just ask nicely. Everything our parents taught us about good manners absolutely holds true.
Adrian, it's been so good to talk to you. Go to beingfreelance.com. As there are for all our guests, I put links through, try and fill out the show notes best I can. And in this particular one, I'll ask Adrian if he's got links that I can share to do with the carers conversation that we had as well, of course. Adrian, thank you so much. And all the best being freelance.
Well, to all of us.
Okay, we're done for another one. Please make sure you've hit subscribe or follow or whatever the lingo is these days on these things. And I will see you online, shall I? Come find me on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and of course in the Being Freelance community on a daily basis. And I'll see you for another one of these very soon indeed. In the meantime, you have a great week. Being Freelance.